Hi there, this is Mahesh Thapa, the starving photographer from starvingphotographer.com. And today I want to show you how to quickly and easily combine a sunset sky with an image taken later on during the evening when the building lights have come on. So basically a sunset sky with a nighttime look of the buildings. We are in a Lightroom right now, and I have two images for you to look at. The first image is basically around sunset, and you can see a nice colorful sky. I'll double click on that. But the buildings aren't very interesting in the sense that the lights have just begun to come on the Hotel Paris, the building itself, and the pseudo Eiffel Tower. However, now if we look at the image slightly later on, the buildings look gorgeous, and you've got this water show coming up from the Bellagio Hotel. The water is well lit, but the sky is sort of a bland blue. So wouldn't it be nice if we could quickly and easily combine the sky from the first image with the sky from the second image? And this tutorial is going to show you how to do it relatively easily in Photoshop. So let's just go over some of the parameters that I have on these images. So the very first part, this was taken around 5:30 p.m. On the 27th of February. I took this on a Sony a7R III using the 16-35 G Master f2.8 lens. If we look at the parameters, I shot the lens at its optimum aperture, which is about f8. I did have a neutral density filter there to average out the ripples in the water and make it look a little smooth. And so the ND filter, I think it was a 5-stop or 8-stop ND filter in front of the lens, such that the exposure time is now 5 seconds. And this is sort of important if you have water in your picture or if you have reflections, because you want the exposure time to be in the same order of magnitude on both images. Because if you have a water that's very choppy in one image and a water that's relatively smooth in the other, the blend tends to look a little funny. So this is one thing I've learned. And when I say the same order of magnitude, I mean it could be 2 seconds and 5 seconds, things like that. Don't have it 1/1000th of a second or 1/200th of a second on one exposure, and then 2 seconds or 20 seconds or 50 seconds on the second exposure, because the blending of the ripples becomes a little problematic. So that's one sort of pro tip I want to convey to you guys to begin with. So those are the parameters of the first image, the sunset image, and this is the parameters of the second image once the building lights have come on. So this was taken at 5:58, so let's see, about 25 minutes or so after the first image. And again, the exposure time is a little less, even though it's darker, at 1.6 seconds, but it's in the ballpark of the 5 seconds of exposure that was in the first image. And if we look at the water pattern, it's relatively similar, so the blend is not going to be that harsh or unrealistic looking. And again, shot this at the same aperture. You want to try to keep the same aperture because you want to minimize the effect of magnification that can happen with differences in aperture values. But with a 16-35 lens, I think I shot this at 35 millimeters, both images, of course. It's not going to be that big of a deal, But so if you have to change the aperture a little bit one way or the other, not going to make a big difference on ultra wide angle lens. The longer the focal length, the more careful you want to be at keeping that aperture value around the same number, just so you want to minimize the magnification that can happen. So again, this was taken with a Sony a7R III, so the resolution is great. And of course, I used a very high quality, the G Master 16-35 millimeter lens at f8 and 35 millimeters. This is going to take a quick zoomed up view. This is at 100%. You can tell everything's very, very sharp, very clean looking. So I mean, there really is a great looking file, both for the sunset image, which I'm showing here, and the previous image where we showed you what it looked like post sunset. Okay, so let's go back to our grid view. Also, let's talk about the shooting conditions and the equipment. Besides a high quality lens and camera, you want to make sure you have a sturdy tripod. And basically, you're keeping the tripod in the same position over this extended period of time because you want to make sure there's no misregistration or alignment issues later on, which does mean that you're basically sacrificing yourself or your equipment to that one particular composition. So find your composition and stick to it, because you can't move your tripod, you can't change your settings. You just have to take it as best you can from that position that you're at, because you want to have perfect alignment. And as we go from one image to the other, you see that indeed there is great alignment in these two images. So with that being said, let's go up to Photoshop, and what I typically do is I select both images, this one here, and command click on the Mac, and I'm going to right click or two finger click and say edit in and open as layers in Photoshop. And here it is coming up. And here is the blue hour image, and so on top of this, the sunset image will show up. And you see it on the right hand side, we have two layers. First the sunset layer and then the blue layer. So if I toggle the eye icon here, you can see that there's good registration, not very much movement. That being said, I always run the auto align layer algorithm to the layers and the images to make sure that there's no misregistration whatsoever. So I'm going to select the first layer is already selected, and I'm going to command click the second layer, showing that both layers are now selected, and I'm going to go to edit. Down here that says auto align layers, and typically I just choose the auto function. That seems to work pretty well for these types of images, so I'm going to hit OK. So the program looks for edges and similarities and aligns the two images as best it can, and it usually does a very, very good job. So if you can notice, I'm going to zoom up to 100%. Here at the edges, you could tell that some misregistration was present, but it has been adjusted. So now let's see how this looks with and without the top layer. And so it looks like we've got perfect adjustments. Now let's go back, zoom out. So now it's as simple as just changing the blending mode from normal to this thing that says lighten. And so what it does is the program looks at pixel per pixel over the two layers that you've selected, and it shows you just the brightest pixel from those two pixels. Or it could be, how many of the layers you have. It just shows the very, very brightest of the layers at that particular level. So the theory is, in the sky, it's very dark in the blue hour. The sunset sky is much brighter, so that's going to actually show through. But in the buildings, the building lights that have come on after sunset are much brighter, so that pixel is going to overpower the darker pixels of the sunset image. So you have a nice combination of both the sunset sky and the building lights. And let's look at this at 100% to see how good it is at the edges. And that's what we really care about, because you want to have good registration. You want to make sure that the edges look clean. So I'm going to go to 100%. The sunset building has been replaced beautifully by the night sky image. The edges look great, very, very clean. And even the Eiffel Tower itself looks really, really clean. And I think it has done a wonderful job. Now, if you still think the image is overall too bright, which I do a little bit, as a final step, I just adjust the contrast with curves. So I'm going to create a new layer, new adjustment layer, and I'm going to say curves. And here, I'm going to call it curves 1, that's fine. Okay, here I'm going to make it a little bigger so I can work with the curves. So now I'm going to make a contrast curve, basically, increasing the brightness and decreasing the shadows. And if I've crushed the shadows a little too much, I can bring it up a little more from down here. That's pretty good, and I can decrease the extreme highlights just a little bit. Okay, and in a few easy steps, really it's taking me longer to explain it than to actually do it. We've got a very, very good looking image where we have the sunset sky, a brilliant sunset sky, and the gorgeous nighttime buildings. So let's just look at how this is. And I'm going to come down here, make this a little bigger. So original blue hour image here. Let's make it like so. sunset sky put in with the lighten blending layer, and an overall slight adjustment, if you will, to the curves to give you this slightly more contrasty image, if you will. And there you go. A simple way of blending a sunset sky and nighttime building appearance.